Where do we go from here? Joining me to discuss, Tony Blair's former spin doctor, staunch Remainer, and editor-at-large of the New European, Alastair Campbell, and also the Eurosceptic Conservative MP John Redwood, one of the signatories to that letter to the Prime Minister today. To you first, Alastair Campbell, where do we go from here? Do you think Theresa May needs to do something like Mr Redwood is suggesting and say to the EU, you know what, we will go on WTO rules, we'll just walk away?
I think if Theresa May were to take that advice, it would be the end of Britain as a serious country and the end of her as a serious politician. And it's just extraordinary. I think it underlines that there is part of the right wing of the Conservative Party that John Redwood represents that actively wants no deal. Why on earth, on the eve of an important moment in the process of negotiation, do you suddenly come out and say the best thing to do is to walk away? And people need to understand what this no deal is. Just two words, but it means higher prices, it means lower growth, it means utter chaos in our customs infrastructure. It probably means a hard border back in Ireland and the peace process under massive pressure. And I'm afraid that Theresa May, sadly, is becoming the seventh successive Conservative leader who's just failed to stand up to these hard right. Ken Clarke, I think it is, who calls them headbangers. John Major had much harsher language for them. But they are putting Britain's future at risk, and what's more, they know it and they don't care.
OK. John Redwood, you were shaking your head during that. Do you imagine that Theresa May welcomes your intervention, though?
I hope so, because what we said in our letter is that business doesn't like uncertainty. We know we can trade perfectly well under WTO rules and with their modest tariff schedule, because that's how we conduct our trade at the moment with the rest of the world. So to end the uncertainty, if they don't want to talk to us about that free trade agreement we'd all rather have, we should say we're planning seriously for this. This is how we will behave on the 30th of March 2019 if the EU haven't woken up and realised that a free trade agreement is very much in their interests.
Well, Alastair Campbell, what is wrong with the UK embracing World Trade Organization rules? You know, we use them to trade with other countries around the world successfully. We would, as the EU and the UK are both members of the WTO, if that was the case, we would have most favoured trading status. It could work, couldn't it?
No, you won't get why do you automatically qualify for most favoured nation status? That will not happen. John Redwood and his friends and colleagues, they're just not being straight with the British people. If we come out of the single market on a no-deal basis, so we lose our biggest trading partnership, we lose 66 trade deals with 66 countries that we currently do through the European Union. We plunge businesses into total chaos with them not knowing the regulatory systems in which they're working. It is a total fantasy, and it's, I'm afraid, all of a piece with the fantasies that have kept these right-wing headbangers on Brexit going as long as they have. And I was on a programme with John the other day, and he said he made perfectly clear to me he saw this as a gigantic Christmas present, and he wanted to take the ribbons off and start playing with the toys. It is the future of our kids and their kids that we're talking about. It would be a catastrophe for Britain if we come out with no deal, and I'm pleased to say it looks like Theresa May is going to completely ignore this total nonsense and get back to the real stuff where things are frankly going badly enough even without this to be thrown into it.
I mean, Mr Redwood, you again shaking your head during that, but I mean, how do you know that this will be the situation, as Alastair Campbell says, if we do adopt, you know, the WTO rules surrounding our trade? Who's to say that Europe will give us most favoured status? Who's to say that they won't want massive tariffs on our trade and our services, more importantly?
Well, once a spin doctor, always a spin doctor. Mr Campbell just spends his whole time falsifying my views and pretending to speak for me in ways that I've never spoken for myself, and then rerunning Project Fear, which was rejected wholeheartedly by the electorate in the referendum. Well, I mean, so many things to unpick, but let's take first of all the fib that we won't have access to the trade deals that the EU has done whilst we remember, because of course they innovate to both the rest of the EU and to the United Kingdom. Well, all you have to do is just make sure the other party to them is happy to carry on, and as I understand it, they are all happy to carry on. No country is saying they want to break the trade deal.
You and Liam Fox have spoken to these 66 countries, have you?
I haven't, but the International Trade Department is doing just that, and no international country has notified us that they don't wish to carry over the trade deal. They liked it when they negotiated it. Why would they want to upset it or throw it over. Many people see the UK becoming
because
a full member of the
Because
WTO
people like you said it was
with
going
vote
to be
and voice.
easy to do a deal.
Just don't keep interrupting. I didn't interrupt you when you were giving all this twaddle
Well, I'm going
out.
to challenge
So why
the
don't you listen to
nonsense
some
that
of the
you talk.
facts
You talk
about the
complete
position?
nonsense.
Mr. Campbell, just
They're
let
not
him,
facts. You're
just let
talking
Mr.
complete
Redwood
nonsense.
finish. Sorry.
I mean, the
Well, I
public
wish
would
you media
actually-
people would not let him get away with it the whole time.
We'll give you a chance to have a
He
go
talks
back in a
complete
second.
nonsense about the WTO.
Yep. Just finish your point, Mr. Redwood, then we're going to go back to Alastair.
I think the public would like to hear a little of the factual background that a lot of countries welcome Britain taking up her full vote and voice again. We're still a member of the WTO, and that is what Mr. Fox and his department are doing. And of course, if we go to WTO terms for our trade with the rest of the EU, as we currently enjoy with the rest of the world, there is no way that the EU can have a more damaging relationship with us than they do with the rest of the world. That's one of the fundamental rules of the WTO. Whereas we, of course, out of the EU's control, will be able to make our trade freer with the rest of the world. We can unilaterally remove tariffs on, say, South African oranges or other foodstuffs we want to buy from outside the EU, which will help the shopping basket. So we have a lot of options. I want to get on with making sure we can have more free trade agreements with the non-EU part of the world, which, as the EU itself says, is going to be about 90% of world growth in the years ahead. And above all, I want to spend the 12 billion that we currently send and don't get back to the EU. So I think that would be a very welcome boost to our public services and our economy.
I would suggest that bringing up the numbers that are on the side of the red bus when you're talking about sides fibbing might not be the best idea. Alastair Campbell, what did you want to say to him?
Well, I just think, honestly, he's living in a fantasy world, and the worst thing about it is I think he knows it. The European Union, let's just wind back a bit to when we had the referendum. John Redwood and all of his friends and cronies and acolytes, they said it was going to be easy to make a deal with the European Union. Now they're actually advocating no deal at all. They said it was going to be easy once we became a third country to make deals with these other countries. We've done nothing on that apart from boost Liam Miles's Air Miles account. We are not. These countries, can you name any of these 66 countries, John, who've said that they are going to, you've just said glibly that they're all going to welcome us being at the WTO. Which of those 66 countries have come out and said they want that to happen in terms of their bilateral trade relations with us? And I honestly think, I'm beginning to feel sorry for Theresa May. It's her own fault in that she's never actually tried to bring the country together around something sensible. But her policy now is being driven by people like this who said they were going to get a deal, said it would be easy to get a deal, and now are actively pushing for no deal at all. Otherwise, why on earth would they be raising it on the day that she goes to a summit where she's trying to do the deal that they claimed a year ago they wanted?
OK, Mr Redwood, can you name...
I really do wish you people would stop them.
Mr Redwood, can you name any countries?
Well, there are a lot of countries that want to have more active, freer trade arrangements with us: New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Switzerland.
What about within the EU?
Singapore. There are all sorts of countries that are welcoming us, returning to the WTO with vote and voice. And I repeat that I know of no country which currently has an agreement with the EU that doesn't want to transfer it to us as well as the rest of the EU.
But what about countries? I think Alastair Campbell's point is, what about countries within the EU?
The question is whether it will.
I'm saying they will. I don't know of anyone who wants to.
And do they
stop
prefer
it.
do they want to trade with us or with the EU? Which is more important to them now?
Well, both, and it will transfer to both. They don't have to choose. Why don't you understand the system before you go into a rant like this? The system is set up, believe it or not, Mr. Campbell, to promote freer trade around the world. That is what the WTO is dedicated to. They deeply welcome the UK being a more powerful voice with a vote in the WTO, because, as the Prime Minister has said, we're going to be a powerful voice for free trade around the world.
So none of them will impose.
We start off by transferring those existing deals,
on British goods,
and then we go on to do much better deals elsewhere. And in some cases, I think
there'll be no
will
tariffs
use
on
our
British
right
goods
to unilaterally remove tariffs, to give a better deal to our customers, and to give a better deal to emerging countries.
Alastair Campbell, I mean, John Redwood has a point, doesn't he? You know, if a country is buying goods from the EU and buying goods from Britain as part of the EU, it's a good that, you know, goods that Britain alone produce. Say cider from Somerset, they're buying it through the EU at the moment. What's to stop them buying it from the UK later, separately? That it's not going to be in their interests to start seeking out substandard cider in the rest of Europe, but they want Somerset cider. Why wouldn't they buy it from us?
No, you've got the European Union there. We do 45% of our trade with them. They do 10% of their trade with us, okay? And what's more, the markets that we try to replace, they will have 27 countries where they can start to replace those markets. We will be out on our own. Now, people like John Redwood, I just wish they'd be honest about it. They want that. They want us to have nothing to do with them whatsoever. This has been a long-term political project for them. And the idea that we're going to replace these lost markets by doing a bit of business here with South Africa, a bit of business there with New Zealand, we're leaving voluntarily the biggest market in the world, tariff-free, where we've managed to boost our prosperity and help keep peace in Europe over a generation. And John Redwood, for ideological reasons, at any cost, whatever the cost to growth, to jobs, to prices and the rest, he's prepared to put that at risk.
Okay, John Redwood, do you think this idea of walking away from talks when we've really just got to the first hurdle, essentially, in some people's eyes, is necessarily a mature way to approach negotiations with the EU nations? It sounds a bit like a child sulking and taking their ball back, doesn't it?
Well, let me just first of all deal with that further nonsensical rant. We're in no way going to turn our backs on the EU. We want a very positive and friendly partnership, as the Prime Minister has set out. It's massively in their interest to carry on tariff-free. If by any chance they opt for rather modest levels of WTO tariff, that's an average of 2.5%. We are 15% more competitive thanks to the strength of the euro against sterling as well as other currencies over the last year. So I can't really see what the damage is that Mr. Campbell is suggesting. As to what we're saying today, we're saying that business does worry about the uncertainty.
Great news. The plummeting pound has been fantastic news, has it, John?
OK, let John Redwood finish. Sorry, about the merit of taking this stance today.
Badly informed. I presume Mr. Campbell hasn't seen that the pound has actually risen against the dollar and the yen for quite a bit of this year. I was talking about the strength of the euro, which gives us
the pound plummeted on the back of Brexit, and you're now celebrating that as good news.
But it's come back up again, hasn't it, Alastair Campbell?
You're again trying to put silly words into my mouth because you don't like dealing with the realities that I'm explaining. But on what we're doing today, which I'm sure your viewers will be interested to know, we're saying that to end the uncertainty for business, we're endorsing what the Prime Minister is doing, which is preparing for us to be able to trade and carry on perfectly well if there is no agreement of a wider nature with the EU. And that is doubly important. One, because we might end up like that, as I always said to people in the referendum campaign. And two, because that is the best way for the EU to see that we have a serious other option. And so why wouldn't they? They want to accelerate talking to us about trade, because as the German leaked paper showed this week, the German government, and I'm sure it's true of some of the other governments as well, are deeply in favour of a free trade agreement with us, given their exports.
We will make America great again.